Are you struggling with roadblocks as a woman in the challenging and constantly changing world of corporate America? If you feel stuck in your career, you may be holding yourself back and may not even realize it. Prepare to be enlightened by the meaningful discussions here at the No Woman Left Behind podcast. Each week, gather the insight you need to break down those walls of limiting beliefs. Unleash your full potential and unlock the leader within. Listen to raw conversations with corporate women as they share inspiring stories with the purpose of obtaining their dream career and living a truly fulfilling life. Here's your host, Rosie Zilinskas.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the No Woman Left Behind podcast show. I'm Rosie Zilinskas, your podcast host. I am extremely excited today to bring you a transgender activist. Mary Ann Horton is a PhD, made a name for herself as a transgender activist in business and social circles. Her efforts to bring transgender equality and benefits to the workplace earned her the Trailblazer Audi Award. Mary Ann spent a storied career as a computer systems architect, internet pioneer, and entrepreneur. She is an author and speaker, and in theory, retired. I can't wait for you to hear Mary Ann's story. It is incredibly interesting. She goes through many trials and tribulations in her journey. I will let her tell you her story and where she is today. Mary Ann was an integral catalyst for transgender equality and benefits in corporate America. The reason why I invited Mary Ann onto the podcast is because she can be an advocate for those people thinking about coming out or even transitioning. So with that, stay tuned for Mary Ann's story. Mary Ann, thank you so much for being here on the No Woman Left Behind show. I'm going to start by asking you, what does transgender mean?
Hi, Rosie. Thanks for having me on the show. This is fun. Transgender is an umbrella term. It can refer to a lot of different types of folks, but in general, it refers to people whose gender identity doesn't match their sex assigned at birth. So, for example, we have transsexuals who are people that feel so strongly about their gender identity mismatch that they want to live full-time as the opposite gender than their birth assignment. Those can be either male to female, born male, going to female, or female to male, going in the other direction. We also have non-binary people. Sometimes they'll use they, them pronouns, and this might include cross-dressers or gender fluid people that are men that spend part of their time dressed as women for comfort or enjoyment. This could also include people who don't identify as either gender and they look visibly different than either men or women. And then there are drag queens, drag kings, which are performers in gay bars that are out for effect. They say drag is something you do, but trans is something you are.
Oh.
So being transgender says nothing about a person's sexual orientation. People don't transition in order to not be gay. It's much easier to be gay than it is to be a trans person. I started out being attracted to women, and I've always been attracted to women. So now I identify as lesbian.
Okay.
So one thing your viewers might want to try is cross your arms. Like, the camera's not quite high enough. Cross your arms as you usually do.
Okay.
And then switch it around the other way so that it's backwards. And just leave it there for a little while. And keep them that way while I talk for a second. So for a transsexual, someone who wants to live full-time in the opposite gender, they are going to go through various steps. First, it'll start with counseling to get a diagnosis and to spend some time to make sure they are who they say they are. They may start hormones, which are estrogen, possibly progesterone for people going from male to female. Those are the same hormones that cis women, by the way, cisgender are people who are not transgender. They identify with the gender they were born with. Those are the same hormones that cisgender women take for menopause. Trans men are going to take testosterone, and those hormones will take effect within a few months to a few years. Trans women that are going from male to female will have electrolysis or laser done on their face to get rid of the fur. There will be legal steps such as changing your name, changing your birth gender marker from the birth gender marker to the other one on your driver's license and your passport. And eventually you may do one or more surgeries. That's sort of the crowning touch. So now that I've said all this, think about your arms. Has there been a distraction from your arms? Is it hard to listen to what I had to say?
Yes.
You can let go now.
It's
hard.
Not only that, but I was getting tired, and I could tell like my arms were like starting to lower as you were saying. Now, okay. So that was a lot of information that you provided to us. And I want to say one thing, and I think this is important to be said. This is a conversation about transgender people. And if I say anything that is incorrect or that is out of turn, I want you to stop me and correct me, Mary Ann, because I'm learning. And I think, so one of the reasons why I asked you and invited you on to the podcast show is because people close to me have come out and I have started to learn and educate myself. Now, this is also in line with the work that I'm doing, helping women advance in the corporate world. So when I met you, I knew that I had to jump on the opportunity to ask you to come and be a guest on the No Woman Left Behind show, because I think this is a topic speaking about the queer community and transgender women in the corporate world is not something that is commonplace. It's not something that you hear about all the time. So I jumped on the opportunity to invite you onto the show. So I just wanted to preface this with the conversation. So if I say anything wrong, please go ahead and correct me.
You will be fine, Rosie. You're great.
Okay, sounds good. Now, I know that well, first of all, you live in San Diego, which is beautiful out there, and you are a computer nerd. Is that correct?
That's right.
Awesome. Now, you won the Trailblazer Audi Award. When was that? In
2001.
2001. How did you earn that award? And I think that kind of leads us into a little bit of your story. So can we spend a little bit of time with you sharing about your story? And I might interrupt you if I find something interesting,
Okay.
But how did you get the award? And tell us a little bit about your story.
Sure, I'd be happy to. So I was a late bloomer. I didn't know that anything was different about me until I was in the 4th grade. I started getting interested in women's clothes. I thought skirts were pretty neat, twirling was pretty neat, and I really felt a strong need to wear those great clothes. So I snuck into my mom's room and borrowed some of her clothes, and it was a big secret. And I was secretly cross-dressing, wearing a few articles of women's clothes for years and years. And I grew up, I got married, I told my wife about it. She didn't like it. She did not approve. She said it's not acceptable. So I tried to stop. Couldn't stop. It was just too important a part of who I was. So eventually she caught me and divorced me. And that was a very painful time in my life. But I met another woman that I started dating. And she didn't have any problem with me cross-dressing. She said it was fine. She says it's just clothes. So she was wonderful. I had gone into a purge during my divorce, which means I threw away all my clothes and decided I was never going to cross-dress again. And I'd done that 3 times, and I'll tell you, it's expensive.
Yes.
So I was in a purge at the time, and I told her, well, I have this need to cross-dress, but I'm not cross-dressing right now. I'm in the middle of this divorce. And she says, that's fine, no worries. So about 6 months later, the need was coming back. And I was over at her apartment, and I mentioned to her that, well, I'm starting to feel that need come back. And she didn't say a word. she got up, went into a room, and came back with a manila envelope and handed it to me. And what she had done, this was in 1988, she had written a way to, Phil Donahue had crossdressers on their show at the time. And she'd written away to the address and gotten their literature and held on to it just for whenever I was ready, which was a very loving thing for her to do. And I was very touched. So I made contact with this organization. It's called Tri-S, the Society for Second Self, Tri-S. And it's basically a group of crossdressers that get together and dress as women and talk and socialize. This helped me develop my femme side. We call it being on femme when we're dressed as a woman, as a woman. And I grew and grew, and Beth was there supporting me. She was great. And we eventually got married, and I developed so that I had two lives. I had a life as a man, and I had this closeted life as a woman where nobody knew that I was a crossdresser, and I was afraid to come out.
Can I interrupt you right there?
Sure.
So when you were afraid to come out, were you living your life just within your home, and you weren't cross-dressing anywhere outside of your home?
Well, my wife and I would go out to dinner on the times when my kids were with their mom. Sometimes we'd go up to the Tri-S meetings. Eventually, I was living in Columbus, Ohio at the time, and the Tri-S meetings were in Cleveland, which is a 2-hour drive. So we started a group in Columbus. I was one of the founders of the Crystal Club, and that was a lot more convenient. It was maybe a half an hour drive, but being an organizer of the meeting, of course, there's a lot of work to do. But we'd go to the support group meetings, we'd go out to dinner, or in the house, but mostly it was going out for a dinner or something like that.
Got it.
So a few years later, in 1996, I was with Bell Labs, and that became AT&T. And in 1996, AT&T spun off Lucent Technologies, which was the technology and manufacturing part of AT&T. And Lucent had a poster up in the hallway that got my attention. They had an employee diversity group called Equal, whose mission was to support gay, lesbian, bisexual, and transgender employees. And I had never seen transgender in that context before, and it got my attention. So I joined Equal, and they were great. They were really supportive, but I was the only transgender person there. So they taught me about gay and lesbian, and I taught them about transgender. But I should caution you that I was not a typical transgender person, and every journey is different. So don't assume that all trans people were like me. I got a lot of crap from my friends who were transsexuals saying, why are you as a crossdresser going out and telling people that all trans people are like you? They just assume they're like you. And I said, okay, I'll be clear about that. Every journey is different. I didn't realize I was transsexual at the time, but I identified as a crossdresser. So I went to a conference and I learned how important it was to have sexual orientation in the non-discrimination policy for the company. Lucent was very proud, or I should say Equal was very proud, that Lucent had just added sexual orientation to their non-discrimination policy. So all the gay men, lesbians, and bisexuals could be out in the workplace, and they didn't have to spend energy hiding who they were, just like we spent energy folding our arms the wrong way. People were spending energy hiding who they were, and that affected their productivity at work. So being able to come out of the closet was very, very important. And I thought about that, and I thought, well, I would really like this too. I would love to be able to come out of the closet, but I'm not protected because there's nothing in that EO policy that says anything about transgender people. So I'd learned from the people at Equal how to do an ask. So I did an ask. I asked through channels if there was any possible way to have language added to Lucent's EO policy that said that transgender people wouldn't be discriminated against. And this was unheard of in 1997. Nobody did this. There was no company that had this language in their policy. But I asked, and a few months later, the message came back through the channels that said, well, if we were to add language, what language should we add that would be as inclusive as possible? What a wonderful question to hear.
Yes.
So I thought about that. I didn't know the answer, but I had contacts, and I asked the contacts. And after a little bit of work, we came up with the language gender identity, characteristics, or expression, where gender identity protects transsexuals, gender characteristics protects intersex people. Those are born with biological differences so that their bodies are not entirely male or not entirely female. And gender expression protects pretty much everybody who's not Barbie or Bubba. So I asked for that language and I didn't hear anything for months. And finally, word came back in October of 1997 that Lucent had a new EEO non-discrimination policy, and I looked at it, and there was my language in it: gender identity, characteristics, or expression. That was Rich McGinn, the CEO of Lucent, signed that on October 28 of 1997, which was
Wow,
25
Mary
years
Ann,
ago.
that is incredible for you to actually be the Trailblazer. So I guess back to my question, is this how you got the Trailblazer Audi Award?
That was part of it. That was the first thing. The second thing that happened was a few years later. Now, mind you, I still hadn't transitioned, so I wasn't on hormones and I wasn't contemplating surgery, but I had friends and I had colleagues at Lucent who were trans, and they were having a tough time. There was one trans woman at Lucent who was ready for her surgery, and there was no coverage on the health plan for the surgery or the hormones or any of the benefits. And she had to save up in 2000, she had to save up $15,000, which was the cost of a new car in 2000. She had to save up that $15,000 and pay cash in advance for her surgery, because all the trans surgeons knew that they needed cash in advance or they wouldn't get paid because insurance wouldn't cover it. So I didn't think this was fair. I saw how hard it was for her to save up that money. So I did another ask, and I asked if it would be possible for Lucent to add coverage for the trans health benefits to their policy. And some months later, she got her check, and Lucent made the statement that, yes, we cover that now. And I was elated, and she was made whole.
Wow.
So I felt really good about that.
That's
So
fantastic.
those two things happened, and those I got nominated for the Trailblazer Award from Out and Equal. Now, Equal was Lucent's LGBT workforce group, and a lot of big companies have these. They're called employee resource groups.
Yes.
Most Fortune 500 companies have them for LGBT people, for women, for African Americans, for Hispanic people, and so on. Whatever groups the company decides have workers that want to get together and work on their issues. So Out and Equal is sort of the mothership for these LGBT employee workforce groups. They're a who's who of Fortune 500 companies, and they're LGBT workers and their HR people, and they all get together and give workshops and do best practices and give out awards. And one of the awards they give out is the Trailblazer Award, which is for the LGBT person who's made the biggest difference in the workplace. And I was nominated for that award, and I was delighted to win that award. That was a big honor. Cincinnati in 2001. And my wife came to that event with me, and my feet didn't touch the floor all night. It was really wonderful.
That's amazing. Okay, so all of the work that you had done, now you have been a transgender activist for the last 25 years. Is that correct?
Well, I was for a number of years after that. Eventually I retired from about 2007.
Okay.
But I was going around in the early 2000s, sort of waving the flag saying, hey, Lucent did this. Maybe some other companies should do this too. So I was networking with other people at Out and Equal, and we got Apple to do it in 1998. A couple other companies, Agir and Avaya, did it in 2000 when they spun off from Lucent. And pretty quickly, Xerox was on board, Chase Bank was on board, IBM was on board. This was starting to be a thing. But in the meantime, there was a dot-com burst, the dot-com bubble burst in 2001, and I was with Avaya at that time, and they had to downsize drastically. So I took a severance package. I figured I'd have no trouble finding another good job, but there were tens of thousands of very capable technical workers looking for jobs in 2001. So it was very hard. I couldn't find a job for quite a while. And while I was looking, I felt a need to, it was getting stronger. The need was getting stronger. I really wanted to work as a woman. I really wanted to be a woman all the time. And there was no job reason not to anymore. And I was out to my kids. But the main reason I didn't transition was my wife wanted time with her husband. So after the Trailblazer Award, she and I were sitting out on the patio the next night, and we're just talking, having a glass of wine. And I told her, I'm thinking of looking for work as a woman. And she said, well, if you were a woman all the time, I'd have more respect for you than if you were just a woman when it's convenient for you. And what I heard was, it's okay to transition to full time. And she said, but, I never signed up to be married to a woman. And what I heard was, it's okay to transition. But that was the death knell for our marriage, because she's a straight woman and she didn't want to be married to a woman. And we wound up with an amicable divorce. So I wound up looking for a job, and I was job hunting. It was a very difficult time to be looking for a job, but I was hunting for a job as a woman. And I was taking whatever crummy jobs I could get just to get experience working as a woman. So I went to Kelly Services, and they sent me to a convention to check people in at the registration desk. They sent me to a rent-a-center to do filing. I wound up teaching a class in how to build websites, where I got paid every third week for 30 hours that I was in front of a class. And these were all really hard jobs, but I found that I liked working as a woman. I just wanted a good job with a steady paycheck.
Mm-hmm. And
eventually I got a nibble from Bank One, which was a big regional bank. It's now part of Chase. Mm-hmm. And I'd applied with them for an IT job many months ago, and they'd finally gotten around to my resume.
Wow, that is quite a journey. Okay, go on.
So they called me in for an interview, and I aced the interview. And I'm talking with the HR person as part of the interview process. And she tells me about all the benefits and everything, and all the routine stuff. And so I share with her, well, I just want to share with you, I'm transgender. And if there's any concerns about that, we have an LGBT employee resource group in Bank One. I know the people, and we can help with any issues that might come up, but I assure you there won't be any problem with that. And she said, well, I'm really glad you opened the door, because I'm not allowed to ask about that. But let me tell you what happened. I was sitting in with the hiring director in his office, and he was looking at the resume, and he's reading your resume, and his smile's getting bigger and bigger, and he's going, and he gets to the part of your publications, and he sees your book. He says, wait a minute, I have that book. Wait a minute, that book is by Mark Horton. And they looked at each other and said, oh. And then Joel looks at Tina and says, oh, what do we do? And he says, well, she asks him, well, can she do the job? And he says, well, yeah, I guess that's what should matter, is she can do the job. So there's no problem. So they hired me. And after working those crummy jobs for 11 months, I was getting a steady paycheck every 2 weeks, whether I deserved it or not. And it was wonderful. And the words came back to me from a boss that I'd had at Lucent, who'd just been outsourced to IBM, which is a terrible thing to happen to anybody. He'd gone from being a department head to being a contractor. It was really a low for all the people that got outsourced. He said, well, every morning I come into work and I ask, what do you need me to do today? Do you want me to solve the business's problems? Do you want me to sweep the parking lot? Whatever we need, I'll do it. And I do it. And then I and then I go home and I laugh my way to the bank.
Exactly.
And I thought about that, and I'm thinking, okay, I'm getting a steady paycheck. This is really good. And the work is good, and I'm working as a woman. So my attitude became really good. All those little annoyances that happen in the workplace from time to time that everybody was complaining about, they didn't really bother me.
Right.
Because life was good. And so my attitude became really good. And I focused on meeting the needs of the business, because I had learned that in manager school at Lucent, meet the needs of the business, focus on the needs of the business. And that made a huge difference. I was focusing on the needs of the business in a constructive way. I was productive. I was much more productive because I was spending all my time as me and not worrying about hiding part of myself. I was bringing my whole self to work. So I had a great attitude. I was promoted twice, and I became their most highly rated worker.
You
So it
know,
was really a thing for me.
I just have to tell you, I think it is so interesting that you say that, because so often people are not engaged in their work. And when you're not engaged, obviously you're bored, you're not happy, and therefore your productivity suffers. But when you are engaged, and you are a perfect example of someone that is engaged in their work, and now that your transition was complete, or I should say, you were outed, and again, correct me if I'm saying anything incorrectly, but
I came out.
okay, so you came out, and that fear of people knowing about you was no longer taking up headspace. And
Mhm.
so you were free to be yourself. And therefore, that came out in your work because you were happy, you were productive, and you ended up being one of their top performers. So I think that that is fantastic. I mean, that's just great. I do want to ask you, what gave you the courage? Was there anything, any final thing? And I know you were in between jobs, but what was the final courage piece that you acquired in order to say, I think I'm ready to live as a woman?
Well, there were three things holding me back. One of them was my job initially. I was closeted at work. One of them was my wife. She wanted time with her husband. And the third thing was my kids. When I came out to my kids, they were, see, Adam was in middle school and Matt was in high school. And those are rough years for kids. And their biological mother, it turns out, is lesbian. So that was a really interesting divorce case, the crossdresser against the lesbian. I wound up winning full custody, but it was quite the epic event. Um, she dropped them off at work or at the school one morning. She had a rainbow bumper sticker on her car, and one of Adam's friends saw that bumper sticker, and he knew what it meant, that that was a gay thing. And so he harassed her into, or he harassed my son into the classroom. And he's going, "Your mom's gay, your mother's gay, your mother's gay." And so he came home from school that night and he told me he went in, he was so mad. And he went up to the teacher and he very politely asked the teacher for permission to kill him.
Oh, gosh.
So when I came out to them, they didn't want to go through that again. They'd already been through it once and it was horrible having all their friends harass them. So they laid down two conditions. Don't come to church as Mary Ann and don't come to school as Mary Ann. The church that we went to, this was a small town surrounded by Columbus, Ohio, and there were like three churches in town. So a lot of people from the school went to the same church. And if I went to church as Mary Ann, then everybody would know.
Mhm.
So those were the rules. I wound up having to sneak into other churches just to go as Mary Ann. But my kids, my wife, and my job were the three things holding me back.
Mm.
And I came out to my kids, so that wasn't a thing. I came out at work, so that wasn't a thing. So really, the final straw was my wife. She wanted time with her husband, and she didn't want me to transition. And I was sort of hanging on by my fingernails, trying to keep this part of my identity as a man. And I realized I was doing it for her. So I
Right.
had to work up the courage to talk to her. And winning the Trailblazer and being out of work, I wasn't going to work every day. So I just sort of booted up every morning in Mary Ann mode and stayed a woman all the time unless there was some reason to be Mark. So it was becoming, I was a woman most of the time, and I wanted to be a woman all the time,
Mm.
not have to like, I wanted to do things like pierce my ears and paint my fingernails and
Right.
do all those kinds of things. And I couldn't do that part time. So shaving my legs, wearing heavy tights in the summer is not fun.
Right. Yes. No, I agree. Now, obviously, that was a big loss for you. And I think you had so much love for her that you were like you said, holding yourself back. And then once you said, I want to do this 100% of the time, she said, well, I don't want to be married to a woman. And then that was the end of your marriage.
It
And
was.
that's
Yeah.
unfortunate. But at the same time, it gave you the freedom to be who you truly desire to be, right?
It did. It did. Life got better. Dating is hard as a trans woman, but life eventually got better. I got to move to San Diego in 2007. I got a call from San Diego Gas and Electric. They needed me. I went to high school in San Diego, so I really love it here. And shoveling snow is overrated.
Yes. Tell me about it. I'm in Chicago.
Yes, definitely. So I was really, really happy to get to move to San Diego. SDG&E valued my contributions, and I'd written some tools when I was a grad student at Berkeley that everybody uses in the Unix and Linux system. So my coworkers were using these tools, and they were like, "You wrote VI? We want you here. Yes, please come." So they were all impressed. So everybody was really supportive when I came out here, and it really helped that the bosses were really supportive. They were wonderful. They valued my contributions. While I was out here, I met a woman at a lesbian social circle. Her name is Katie. We started dating. We became a couple in 2012. We've been together for 10 years now. We got married last year, and life is really good now. I've got the ring. I've got the
Congratulations.
wife in the next room. You know,
Oh,
happy wife, happy life, and it's all legal now. As two women, we can get married.
yes.
So life is really good. I'm retired from SDG&E, um, writing my book. Everything is really happy now, and I love being a woman. I would never go back to being a man.
That's wonderful. Okay. So, again, as you know, this podcast is geared towards women in the corporate world. Can you tell me a little bit about some of the challenges? And again, you have had, I think, an incredible story in the fact that you were the trailblazer, you were kind of paving the path for other transgender people. And what were some of the maybe two challenges that you think were the biggest challenges in transitioning and then becoming this activist?
I didn't really run into that many challenges. I expected to be treated poorly as a woman because women are constantly being talked over, constantly being mansplained to. I heard that all the time, and I've heard that from other trans women too, that when they change, they see the difference. The trans men really talk about how all of a sudden they have credibility, and it's this amazing thing. When their voice changes and they've got he, him pronouns, then suddenly people listen to them. That didn't happen to me. And I was really surprised because I kept expecting it to and I kept looking for it. And I think it's because I brought value to the business. I
Mm,
made it a point to focus on the needs of the business and not to be aggressive or anything, but I took initiative. I saw areas where things could be improved, and I just went about fixing them, making things better, doing the work myself, or getting buy-in and getting other people together to do it, to make the improvement. And the people valued that, because I did it in a constructive way. I see lots of women at work who are sitting passively. They're not contributing. They don't speak up in meetings. They just kind of sit there. Their careers don't go anywhere. Um, the women who I see that are successful, they take initiative. They speak up. Um, they are assertive, but not to knock anybody else. But what they do is they speak up to add value to the business, and they're helpful. They do it in a kind way. People really value that, and that has brought me a long way. I've learned to always focus on the needs of the business, not on my needs personally, not on my little part of the business, but on the business of the whole. I think about what my boss needs, what my boss's boss needs, and if I'm meeting those needs, then everything will take care of itself.
wow, I like that. Now, as far as benefits, have you seen any benefits once you transitioned?
Well, I'm not spending energy hiding myself. So
Okay.
my productivity went up, and I wound up getting promoted. When I was with Lucent, I was promoted. Once I went with Avaya, spinning off with Avaya, I became responsible for promoted to a tech manager responsible for Avaya's email and corporate directory. I went back to being an individual contributor with Bank One and was promoted twice there. Lots of promotions. And it's because I'm not spending energy hiding myself. I'm just being myself. And my voice doesn't pass. And that's intentional. I tried learning how to talk as a woman and have a passable voice, and it's a lot of work, and I can do it, and it sounds really fake. Nobody believes it at all. My coworkers hate it. And they said, Mary Ann, just use your regular voice. We like it better. So, you get this voice, and I realized at a time that I don't pass, and I'm not gonna pass. And I met an activist who intentionally didn't pass. Penny Ash Motts was her name. And she shared with me that she intentionally didn't pass because whenever she's out in public, just interacting with people in, at the store or at work or anywhere, that people know she's trans and they see that, okay, she's trans and she's a regular human being and she's kind and she's a nice person. And so they realize they know a trans person and she's okay. And I was inspired by that. And I thought, okay, I'm going to do that too. And that way I don't have to work on this fakey voice.
Right, right.
So I do that now. And everywhere I go, I'm educating people just by being myself. They realize that they're talking to a trans person and I'm not a drag queen with inch-long eyelashes and 6-inch heels. I'm not some weird person. I'm just a regular person. I just happen to be trans. And by doing that, I figure that I'm an ambassador to the world.
Yeah.
On behalf of the trans community, educating people and saying, okay, this is what trans is.
Wow, Mary Ann, that is so impressive because you are an ambassador and you are an ambassador to the world because your work is so incredibly important. Now more than anything, I think so many people are being more accepting and we are trying to be more inclusive of just people. And I think your work in educating myself as well as so many others is going to be incredible, and it is already incredible.
Thanks.
Now, by the way, I wanted to recognize that you actually have a PhD in computer science from UC Berkeley. So you are a doctor, ma'am.
I am.
So I should have said that at the beginning. So you're a computer nerd. Tell me a little bit about your book.
Well, I was a visible activist in the community. I was going around giving Transgender 101 workshops to universities, to churches, to companies. I tell my personal story in these workshops. And the feedback that I got was that the best part of the workshop was my personal story. So people asked me, they wanted to know more. And I decided to write it all down. So now that I'm retired from SDG&E, I've written a memoir. It's called Trailblazer, Lighting the Path for Transgender Equality in Corporate America. And it's my coming of age story. It's not just about corporate America, it's my whole story. And all the details are there. And it's coming out on October 28th, which is the 25th anniversary of Lucent signing that historic policy.
Wow.
And Lucent was bought by Alcatel. Alcatel was bought by Nokia. So it's Nokia now. And Nokia is all on board with this. They're going to do a bunch of social media stuff on October 28th about the anniversary. They're going to interview me. They're going to interview Ethel Batten, who was the HR director who got the policy signed. And the book is being released on that anniversary on the 28th. It'll be available on Amazon and hopefully in bookstores. And I'm hoping some of our podcast viewers might enjoy reading that book.
Absolutely, absolutely. And we will have the links to all of Mary Ann's information on the blog as we normally do. Now, Mary Ann, I want to ask you emotionally, how do you feel today versus prior to your transition or your coming out, I should say?
Well, no, that's okay. There was a time when I came out in 1996, 97. There was a time when I transitioned in 2001.
Got it.
Oh, there are lots of times. The difference between coming out and being outed is that coming out is voluntary, where I choose to come out. And if someone else outs me, then they're disclosing it without my permission.
Got it.
So that's the difference. That happens, and it's not a good thing. But I had at one point, this big empty yearning to cross-dress. And that was fulfilled by cross-dressing, but the feelings became more and more intense. And there was this very strong need. And at some point, I had a very strong need. I need to be a woman.
Mm.
And now that I am a woman, legally, morally, socially, medically, then the yearning is gone. I'm who I am. I'm who I need to be. I'm comfortable. I'm happy who I am now. I'm happy to be living in paradise in San Diego. I'm happy to be married to my sweetheart. I have a wonderful life now, and I just couldn't ask for more.
Oh my gosh, you just gave me the chills, Mary Ann. I'm like so happy for you. That's just wonderful. Okay, I would like to ask you if you could provide us with 2 tips for trans women specifically, if they're I guess I'll leave it up to you as far as like what you want to do for tips, because we could go a lot of different ways. But the point is how to be happier, how to advance in their career. So could you give us those 2 tips?
So I would say be true to yourself. Um, I know if you haven't transitioned at work yet, if you haven't come out yet, haven't transitioned, and there's a yearning there, you know your own circumstances. You have to do what's best for you, and every journey is different. Every situation is different. But I tell you that once you come out, once you transition, it gets better. You may have to give up some things, and you have to weigh, what are you going to give up? That was one thing that my dad told me before I transitioned. He said, you can have anything in the world that you want, but what do you have to give up to get that? And I didn't know what he was talking about at the time. I gave up a lot to transition. I gave up 2 marriages, but it got better. Eventually, it got better. And for all those people that have transitioned and you're trying to fit in at work, it's okay. You talk to your boss, you talk to HR. If your company's large enough to have a diversity organization, talk to your diversity folks. Plan your coming out. Definitely plan it. Make sure that your boss is on board with it, and then you make your announcement and you plan it to everybody. Make sure you've got support from the big boss, the person that everybody listens to, because if that person is on board with you, then everybody will be on board with you. And be comfortable, be yourself, and focus on the needs of the business. If you focus on the needs of the business and you're true to yourself and you have supportive management, then you will succeed.
Wonderful. So I'm going to reiterate a little bit. So the first one is be true to yourself. And you said a lot with that. And I think the second one for me is focus on the needs of the business while you're feeling true to yourself and comfortable, and your career will advance, the productivity of the business will advance. Did I get that right?
That advice applies to everybody. If you focus on the needs of the business at work and solving the business's problems, whatever those can be, or whatever your little piece of the business is, that you can help the business succeed, then people will take note of that, and you will succeed. That works for trans women, that works for women, that works for men,
Yes.
and for trans men. I mean, focusing on the needs of the business has been a lifeline for me.
Absolutely. Well, Mary Ann, I thank you so very much for coming on the show, because to me, this has been so enlightening and educational. And I do have one final question. So I've been doing a lot of reading about the LGBTQIA plus, that definition. And one of the things that I read is that we are using, or I should say, the term queer is being used as an umbrella term. And years back, it was a derogatory term, but the queer community has taken that term back, and they are now celebrating it, and it's being used as an umbrella term. So I was wondering if that is accurate and if that resonates with you.
It is accurate. Queer was a slang word, an insult that was thrown at gay men decades ago, and it was a terrible thing to be called queer. But once we kept adding letters to the movement, there was gay, and then there was gay and lesbian, and then it became gay, lesbian, and bi, and then the women got assertive and spoke up for their needs, and it became lesbian, gay, and bi. and we got trans added, so it became LGBT, and the letters keep adding.
Yes.
Letters are adding constantly. So Q has popped up, and you see Q a lot. And that's because many people in the community have reclaimed queer and are saying, this is our term. We're going to take it. We're going to make it a positive thing. And we can say, we're here, we're queer, we're not going shopping.
Got it.
And some people identify as queer, some people don't. Everybody has however they identify. Personally, I identify as lesbian and as trans, but I don't identify as queer. But queer is a perfectly reasonable umbrella term that can be used for the whole community. In practice, we throw all the letters out there: LGBTQ, I for intersex, A for allies, or for asexual. Q can also stand for questioning. And then we say plus because who knows what else is going to come up in the future.
Yeah.
So those are all good terms.
I did a post on that, and I did a little bit of an explanation as to what you just said. And I was amazed because, trying to understand it all, it's just very confusing. I think even for any person trying to understand it all, because you can't be all of those things at once, right? And so it's just good information for us to understand. I am an ally. Like I said earlier, people close to me are part of the queer community. I want to understand. I want to learn. I want to support. So if there's anything that I can do, and by the way, I will be featuring the podcast and making sure that people know about your book coming out, because it is such important work. So thank you again. So any final words, Mary Ann?
I'm just happy to be here. Thank you so much for having me on, Rosie. This has been a lot of fun, and I hope our viewers enjoy it. And I hope we all have a wonderful life.
Wonderful. All right. Thank you so much, Mary Ann.
Thank you, Rosie. Take care.
Mary Ann Horton is an inspiration. Her life was incredible. Her journey was amazing, filled with ups and downs. Mary Ann was integral to bring transgender equality and benefits to the corporate world. Again, that's why she got the Trailblazer Audi Award. Amazing. Mary Ann's 2 tips. Tip number 1 is be true to yourself. One of the things that her dad told her was, Mary Ann, you can have anything you want. You just have to figure out what you're going to give up. In Mary Ann's situation, she gave up not 1, but 2 marriages. And now again, she's happily married and living life as a woman. Tip number 2 is to focus on the needs of the business and you will succeed. Mary Ann said that once she was living as a woman, that didn't take up space in her head, and she was able to really focus on her work and again, focus on the needs of the business. So those are 2 great tips. All of Mary Ann's contact information is going to be on the episode website. So if you go into Apple, click on the episode website, you will see the blog, and all of her contact information is right on the blog. And Mary Ann's book, called Trailblazer, Lighting the Path for Transgender Equality in Corporate America, is coming out on October 28th. So I hope that you buy her book, because again, her story is just absolutely incredible. So with that, remember to be brave, be bold, and take action.
Subscribe to the show at nowomanleftbehind.com for more content like this. Leave a rating and share it with your friends, because we want to make sure that no woman is left behind. Until I see you next time, remember to be brave, be bold, and take action.